What's up, everybody? Welcome back to your favorite New York Jets subscription podcast, Badlands. I'm your host, Joe Caporoso, joined by Paul Kilgallen. A little quick initial reaction to Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji's introductory press conference. Connor and I are going to record also in a few hours because we just can't talk about this enough because we're excited. PK, I read some of your texts in the group chat today. I know you're very excited. So how we feeling at this moment?
I'm feeling really good. I mean, it's kind of ramped itself up for me with each kind of step that's happened here. I kind of laid my flag early that Glenn was the guy that I wanted. And I was, I cast a little shade on Vrabel. That wasn't, I was just kind of talking out loud, but I was early with Glenn. I liked Glenn when I was a kid. I wore 31 in football when I was a kid. And then he gets in front of the cameras today, and you understand why everybody says the things they say about him. He's the same guy that we saw all the video clips about. He dropped the curse out there for the fans, which was, that wasn't really for the players. That was for us. And it's hard not to be excited. I think the three main things I kind of took away from it were Muji was like, he looks kind of young, but it's impressive what he did. I think it reinforced my belief that Glenn is kind of the number one in this organization at this point. He kind of preached the accountability and going across all departments, not just in the football portion, which was nice to hear. That little caveat, like going across every department, right? Not just with football. That was nice. And then Aaron Glenn specifically, I think the two biggest things for me were just like the work ethic that he kind of brought to the table, and he talked a little bit about accountability as well. And then the fact that he wanted to be here, which I think is probably the biggest message of the day, is that for the first time in a long time, somebody wanted us. And he kind of got out in front of it and said, I didn't really want any other job. He didn't use the words leverage, but he said that he wanted this one to be the first interview because he wanted to sign papers and not leave. So it's really good to feel wanted, and it's really good to have what feels like a real win in the offseason here. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a press conference, so I don't like to go too crazy with it. But he won the press conference for what that matters, and the energy and the pride in the organization is something that's just been lacking here for a while. I mean, these guys are following just two beaten down, mopey individuals. I won't keep harping on that. The mope to the hope transition, but that's really what it feels like. And with Glenn, he hit all the right notes. Having all the former players in the room was, nice and nostalgic, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I also think he handled some of the harder questions very well and very professionally. The stuff around Aaron Rodgers and saying that, we're going to look at the full roster. We don't have an answer right now. We're going to take a step back and take a beat and not getting pinned into a corner on something that people were going to overreact to. I actually don't think he could have answered that question any better. And it's a hard question to answer. And that's something that Robert Saleh was not good at. He struggled with these kind of things and would often like say the wrong thing that would get taken out of context. So I think beyond all the rah-rah stuff, which is great, and we love as fans and is important because you need positive energy around this team, I thought he handled some of the more challenging ones well. And, Woody was able to stay out of the way and not make it about him. I think, yes, Muji's like extremely tall and extremely young. It's just kind of like interesting contrast to see from Joe Douglas and McCagnon. And I like that you could sense a mutual respect between those two. They have a shared history. They've talked in the past. I feel like they've been dancing around more formally working together for a while. So I think if you're a Jet fan, it's very hard to leave without feeling good about where these decisions landed. They're opening press conferences. At the end of the day, what happens on the field is what's going to matter. But I was happy. And it's just hard not to be pumped up watching a guy who's got pride in the organization, who wanted the job, who wanted to be here, who is hitting the right notes that come off not as a slogan, but come off as authentic and shows like an ability to navigate a challenging media. He was able to send it right back to them when they were trying to pin him down on the Rodgers question. And I'm not knocking the beat. They're doing their job. We're friends with everyone on the beat. They should be pressing on that question. But I think he handled it well. And like every Jet fan, I was like, fuck yeah. Like during that press conference, it's about time instead of the friggin' monotone, Saleh and hiding from everyone, Joe Douglas. And I get they're beaten down after 6 years, but it was a nice breath of fresh air. Was my immediate take.
Yeah, and there were a couple surprises in there too, which I'll get to in a second. But like the Rogers stuff specifically, at a minimum, whether you like Rogers or don't like Rogers or want him back or don't want him back, it was nice to hear the way that that question was answered, basically being like, this is not about Aaron Rodgers, right? And we tried being the Aaron Rodgers led organization for the last 2 years. And like, not only did it not work, it kind of blew up in flames, right? Like things got out of control. And this last season was one of the most miserable I can remember in a long time. So I appreciated not only the answer, but the way it was answered. Felt like he kind of put a stake in the ground there and said, no, like, I'm the top guy in charge here starting today, and this is how I'm going to run things. And as far as the surprises that I talked about, you hinted at like the authenticity of it all, right? And I think we especially have grown tired of the slogans because Salah was so heavy on them. The all gas, no brakes thing, the 60% shirts, the race to 21, like all that stuff. It got so old because the product on the field never reflected what we were hearing. And when the eyes don't match with the ears, that just screams phony, right? And so the things that I'm referring to is number one, Mooj told a story when he first got up there about interviewing Glenn for a head coaching position in Denver a couple years back. And he told a story about like asking Glenn, what is the first team meeting going to sound like? Like, what are you going to say? And rather than kind of pitching on an idea, Glenn just like stood up and started giving the speech, right? And that was a moment that was not meant for public consumption, right? Like Glenn didn't do that to impress anybody. He didn't do it for a camera. He did it to get a job, and he did it to like show what his potential employer was all about. And so like that's a thing that screams authenticity to me because it wasn't meant for us. We were never supposed to know that. And Mooj told it. And the other thing that surprised me was that Aaron Glenn still talks to Al Groh every summer. That was like a really interesting nugget, just kind of like
Shout out
tossed
Al
into the
Groh.
middle,
Yeah, I didn't
right?
have him on the bingo card for today.
He said he like goes to his house every summer and they spend time together. I was like, whoa, Al Groh. Some really interesting players were in the audience. Like Fred Baxter was there, Tony Richardson, which like God love Tony Richardson. He was a Jet for like 20 minutes,
Yeah,
and they were very good teams. But he hangs around the facility a lot, and so and then I think the final one was that during one of those exchanges with the beat, um, where they kind of like they were pressing on Aaron Rodgers to get an answer, and he just wasn't giving it. And somebody started to say, "Well, Bill Parcells," and he cut them off, and he was like, "I'm not Bill Parcells, I'm Aaron Glenn, right?" And
yeah,
so not only are we getting the benefit of all those guys behind him, but we're getting a guy who's strong enough, who's not going to fall back on that and be like, "Well, I'm Parcells' guy," right? Like he's also carving his own path, and so man, it was hard, honestly, to find any. And you're right, it's just a press conference, but like this is what we do. We analyze this stuff, we talk about this stuff, and it was hard to find something in there that you weren't happy about, honestly.
yeah. It was look. It was the first public test for him, and he did well. This week is going to be very interesting and important. Time to start hiring a staff. Time to react to what staff he hires and what that whole picture looks like. We're already into Senior Bowl week. The league year is going to be here before you know it. But this process is done. I think you feel good about where it ultimately netted out. I think once Vrabel became not a realistic thing, it was kind of always Glenn, and everything else was basically window dressing. I think they wanted him. He wanted to be here. And I think him being here and being the clear front guy strongly influenced where the GM search landed. And Muji doesn't have to be an afterthought here. He has a very critical role, but I do think the reverse structure of Glenn doing some of the blocking and tackling with ownership and letting him just focus on personnel and scouting and analytics and building out that department. I think that has a better chance of working than what we saw with Douglas and McCagnon when they were more built to be closer to ownership and they couldn't handle keeping that divide. And it's a really tall task for Aaron Glenn, and he may not be able to succeed in it. Ownership is ownership, business is business. We heard a lot of Jaime talk and all that stuff. They're going to be involved, but do they respect Glenn a little more because he played here and he sees the gravitas he has with the Parcells and an Al Groh and all the other former players who were there? Some wouldn't even play with him. Guys like Mangold and Damian Woody turning out that they say, you know what, like we're gonna just like get out of the way. And this is Aaron Glenn's organization, like it was Pete Carroll's organization in Seattle. And he's gonna say, let Mooj do his thing, let him build his staff, and just give us some room to work. And that's all you could ask for. And again, yeah, I thought the way he handled the Parcells framing was really good. And he gave less rope on the Rodgers stuff than I expected. And it doesn't matter, like you said, whether you want him back or not. There's just no reason to get too far over your skis until you have an offensive coordinator, an offensive staff, a full front office, and give First Take some quote tomorrow, WFAM some quote tomorrow. It was very much like Aaron is just another guy in the team. And like, we're going to look at the whole team and see if it fits. And maybe it does fit. And maybe it does make sense. It very well could be the case. But we just don't know yet. And there was no reason to get that far out there. So I think he hit the right beats. And I think Jet fans are rightly, feeling good. Everyone's in like a bit of a good mood today. They watched the Bills lose. I don't know how there's some Jet fans out there who are rooting for the Bills. It must be an age thing, but like, you got to be insane to me to be rooting for the Bills. I don't care if the Chiefs have been there multiple times in a row. So you get that. And, this is, again, people made fun of Dan Campbell's opening presser like they're making fun of Liam Cohn's opening presser, and Dan Campbell's been amazing. But, you watch some of these things and you're like, oh, all right, maybe I feel all right about Aaron Glenn being the front man for the organization, just because it's very few and far between guys who I think can be capable head coaches in the NFL who have a strong identification with this organization and pride around it, because it's hard to have a lot of pride when how bad this whole thing has been. But he was here for one of those turnarounds. So the words are just words, but it was a fun day at Florham Park, and there hasn't been a ton of them like that lately. So it just felt good to turn the page overall.
Yeah. BK. Couple things I wanted to respond to that you said. So the funny thing, you talked about how he handled Rodgers really well and didn't give First Take any highlights or any clips to run. And it's funny, I got a push notification on my phone, probably like, I don't know, 3 p.m. or something. And it said, Aaron Glenn on Aaron Rodgers. The new Jets coach wasted no time addressing the QB's future with the team. And like, I didn't even click it because I was like, I watched it. I know he didn't give you anything. So like, even in the absence of that, they still run with it, which is funny. The other thing along those lines of kind of stepping back and letting him make the decisions and letting him run the show here. Not only were Mooj and Glenn both on the same page with that, but they somehow got Woody Johnson on the same page with that too, because Woody Johnson got cornered by the scrum afterwards as well and got asked 1,000 questions about Aaron Rodgers. And to his credit, handled all of them really well and just said, I am open to him coming back. I'm open to him not coming back. I'm not making the decision. I'm letting them do their jobs. And then they pressed him again and said, will you share your opinion? And he was like, no, I won't even share my opinion. Right. So like, the message has been communicated that like, we don't want Woody involved and we want the adults to be kind of making the calls here. And then the last thing I forgot to mention before, just going back to Parcells one more time. I think this is a thing that we didn't know, but Glenn kind of casually slipped it in there that when he told that story about wanting to get back into coaching and his wife kind of urging him to do so, he said his first call was to Parcells. And he told Parcells he wanted to get a job as a QC coach. And Parcells said, no, you're going to go be a scout. You're going to go on the road. And he said he didn't want to be a scout, but he trusts Parcells. So he listened to him. And I guess the reason and kind of the moral of that story was that Parcells knew he would be a head coach someday and wanted him to see every part of an organization. So that was just another real cool thing I kind of pulled out of today.
Yeah, look, it hit all the beats and it all ties together well. And now we get to see it in action and take a step back and dig a little deeper into these guys' resumes. To Glenn, to Muji in particular. Muji, more of an unknown, less discussed in the recent months. How does he fit into this whole picture? That's going to be a lot of what Connor and I talk about a little later. Not full Newmark files length, but we do want to spend a lot of time this week poking and prodding more around Muji, how he's going to run that front office, how Aaron Glenn's going to build out his staff, because there's just a lot more news to come and news to react to as we get some early reports out of Senior Bowl where we have both Connor and Will. So before we wrap, we again remind everyone, live show, April 11th. We're at 137 tickets sold. We've been challenged by the bar to get as close to 200 as we can. I like to see us just get over 150, and then we can keep pushing and figure it out from there. So badlandstoj.com. We also have a new Aaron Glenn shirt, which we'll link out in the bio here because he just got too fired up after the press conference not to get it out there. So we wanted to get the 6 p.m. reaction pod the 9 p.m. reaction pod. And then Jake and Paul are back on tomorrow for the other guys' reaction pod. Jake's on the Kelsey whirlwind right now, as he is every Super Bowl season. Guy's probably going to be lifting up the trophy with Travis this year with how tight they are at this point. Too big time for us, but we'll have him out at the live show. And you could expect a very full week here at Badlands. I think we hit like 19 podcasts last week. My guess is we're close to that number again this week. Final thoughts, PK.
No, I'm excited. It's going to be a fun week, and I'd like to see kind of where the momentum goes from here. If they're going to be down at the Senior Bowl, Combine will be just around the corner before we know it. We'll get some staff hires, so a lot of good stuff coming. Football doesn't sleep anymore.
Amen. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we will talk to you soon, as in like 4 hours. All right.